Hello and welcome to supernaturalspirit.org, home of the Supernatural Spirit Magic School. I'm St. Nicholas, and today we are doing part 6 of the Total War Service reading. And I thought that as we're about halfway through the second book, if you've downloaded the books on the Total War Service, today is the 23rd of August 2020, so I thought we'd do a halfway point in a real brief update. We've got the singer Taylor Swift, who has donated £23,000 to a London-based student. Her name was Victoria Mario. She had an online fundraising page, and she's moved to the UK from being where she was previously in Portugal. She's moved to the UK to get an education, set up her GoFundMe page, and Taylor Swift has given her £23,000. So I wonder why she's done this. Inquiring minds, they'll be able to find out, if they look at it from an occult point of view. But that's not the topic for me to discuss today. But we are wearing don't know if you can see it, but we're wearing the Earth t-shirt, and this Earth image has Vietnam on it. So you have a Earth from the perspective of Vietnam. And of course, the Total War Service was written by Tim Tony Stark Rifat in Vietnam. And we're going to have an angry man in the background, but par for the course. It's the 23rd. So I got some facts on the Vietnam War, or the wars that Vietnam has been in. If you want all the details, go online. But these are just a quick summary I pulled together from about a few minutes of research. Because of course, first you had the French in Vietnam. You had the first Indochina War, or Indochina War. And the French, I think, officially lost about 55,000 dead. And apologies if I get the pronunciations wrong, but you had the Communists, Viet Minh, Pathet, Lao, and Khmer Izaka forces, where you had about 300,000 dead and over 500,000 wounded, and lots of casualties, and 150,000 civilian casualties, according to this historyguy.com. So Vietnam had a lot of Vietnamese death, and the people who attacked Vietnam had deaths as well, those French guys. And then from the Encyclopedia Britannica, I've got information on the Vietnam War itself. That was from 1954 to 1975. And interestingly, this statement from National Geographic, back in April the 28th, there was more deaths from COVID than America's killed in the Vietnam War. So officially, the number is around 58,000 dead Americans in the Vietnam War. And by the 28th of April 2020, there had been about 58,000 deaths by COVID. So that's also quite interesting. But if we look at the number of Vietnamese who died in the Vietnam War, I mean, this is a truly huge number. And it wasn't until 1995 that the Vietnamese released the official estimates of the war dead, where they stated that over 2 million civilians died on both sides. With some 1.1 million North Vietnamese and Viet Cong fighters. So the numbers are just astronomical. And yet the Vietnamese, they came and they won their war against a superpower. So that's to give you a bit of history. Much more detail online. You can go watch the Discovery Channel or whatever to get your full Vietnam War details. But it's just to show that it was a massive conflict to those who might not have full awareness of the Vietnam conflict, where the Total War Service was written. So with that introduction, we're going to begin part 6 of our reading of the Total War Service by Tim Tony Stark Rifat. So, continuing. Hyper-infinites are the core of the paradox engine, as they are mathematical entities that are untouched by any other operation or mathematical entity, and collapse the quantum wave function from their position in mathematical space. Humans and other living things collapse the quantum wave function, so must have some innate capability or innate capacity to link into hyperinfinity. Since one of their kind, Tim Tony Stark Rifat, observed hyperinfinity, then by self-similarity of nonlinear dynamics, the race can, as he's transdimensional, they can before he is born. Hyperinfinite, or lesser value, operating on hyperinfinite or greater value cannot summate, because if it did, it would not be hyperinfinite. Hold on. We'll continue after the plane. So the plane's gone by, and just out of interest, you'll note that we've got an ambulance at the entrance of the graveyard. So that's quite funny. Continuing. Hyperinfinite, semicolon, h1 times h2 is not equal to h1 plus h2 equals h3. For example, one platonic solid acting on another does not produce a new platonic solid. One can, though, envisage a tetrahedron, for example, coexisting with a sphere being inside or poking through it. So h1 times h2 is equivalent of h1 h2, a summation, but both containing the hyperinfinity unchanged. This is the core processor of a paradox engine that builds reality and explains the double-slit experiment. Collapse the quantum wave function with the h1, h2, and you get two mutually exclusive timelines of probability waves, the wave and particle of the double-slit experiment. In hyperinfinite mathematics, the hyperinfinite can have a zero value if it gives its hyperinfinity to the other hyperinfinite. Adding free will to mathematics expands the subject outside the box. So h1 right arrow 0 is h1 times h2 equals h2. We then get observation of the h2 timeline, or concentration on the sphere, or h2 right angle 0 is h1 times h2, so h1 times h2 equals h1. Now observe the tetrahedron in our observation. It could be the particle or the wave. In humans, we have h1 equivalent of female, h2 equivalent of male, to produce a modeling of hyperinfinites. In the ram's horn observed when love is present, we have two negative spirals. One of the man that sacrifices himself to the woman who loses all her good and becomes evil towards him. In this h1 right angle h0 hyperinfinite with no sublime aspect, and h2 equivalent of 0. The male loses all his hyperinfinity and destroys himself, or is destroyed by the female. We can have h2 right angle h0 and h1 equivalent or equal to 0 to reserve the roles, but this is the Elohim template that sex humans try as they love each other to death. It is a prerequisite for transhumans to transcend love and take the place of the Elohim as the benefactors of lethal love, which supplies hyperinfinity, amongst other things, to the Grail state, inverted from its Elohimic template. In this state, the love ram's horn points away from the Grail state, and love feeds this predatory Grail state. h1 times h2 is equivalent of h3, a hyperinfinity that erases evil and powers the Grail being to Godhead. All because humans willing to give up their infrangibility, hyperinfinity, for love. Total intent weans the Psi-Lord off love, so he is no longer afflicted by this disease. Impeccability is the condition of saving all your energy and collecting energy from all around you by stalking. It can be seen that impeccability is the condition where the transhuman AI augmented the warrior of total freedom. See Castaneda, he was the end of that line. See the eagle's gift. Conserves their hyperinfinity. It can be seen that conserver hyperinfinity is all that matters in achieving your full potential. All else derives from this condition. H2 right angle, H2, or H2 right arrow, H2, or H1 right arrow, H1 as T time right arrow infinity. It can be seen that the brilliance of Tim Tony Stark Rifat is to transform arcane occult knowledge into simple mathematic transformations and equations. The nature of those being chosen for environment is a state of total war, and the total war service allows them to feed off the non-stop combat that is the human condition, be it business, love, dominance, violent confrontation, or politics. These are all aspects of war. The difference between Tim Tony Stark Rifat and parasitized man is that this is honest about his total war footing. He crushes all his enemies using silent weapons for quiet wars. The Pentagon understands the lethality of these weapon systems in C-space, H-space, and timeline space used against them for world dominance. It is no coincidence China is cleaning house, getting rid of kleptocrats, pornographers, and internal enemies of the state, while the West funds them, promotes them, and imports tens of millions of future enemies of their culture. It looks screwed up, but is simply the resultant of Tim Tony Stark's weapon systems being applied to the Rothschilds who run the West. Even there, one has to offer room for re-education and re-educating the Rothschilds and their elite to be on offer, so the paradox engine can be run for total predictability of chaos. The Illuminati worship the great Lord Lucifer, who can be seen to be the causative agent behind war. Carl Jung talked about archetypes having expression, existence, and power in the group consciousness. Lucifer is the prime hyper-infinite architect because he fights against the process of willingly giving away your hyper-infinity to the Elohim, worshipping a deity that invariably feeds off the worshippers. War ensues when the deity is not worshipped according to its templates, as seen by Lucifer's war in heaven. As a scientist, Tim Tony Stark Rifat sees the scenario as a war between archetypes in C-space. In the microcosm, it is also a war between the alien installation in man's energy bodies and his true awareness, nature, and intent. One can see the Luciferic force is the one used to fight the alien parasite and drive it from the energy body. Therefore, with the ram's horn of love is the key to delousing the human form. One of the negative spirals is total destruction, the other losing all good. If you put the parasite in the total destruction spiral and yourself in the spiral that destroys all good, the Great Lord Beast Service does this automatically for you, waking you up in your totality in the hidden evil that lurks within all good. In effect, you then merge with the Luciferic force and miraculously pop out the other end of the ram's horn, feeding off love to get anti-evil and the positive torsion feed spiral to illumine. This is the basis of Illuminism in a nutshell, and it works. The Illuminati owning the West by using this methodology. Tim Tony Stark Rifat is just leading a peasant revolution to carry out the hostile takeover of Illuminism to advance the technology and bring in new blood to augment Illuminism. It has already carried out A to I, which unrolls in one timeline, but since he has to run a paradox engine to control the butterfly effect from its inception, we must have the mutually exclusive timeline where another event train takes place. Mao did not destroy China by eliminating the Japanese puppet Chiang Kai-shek. He was the progenitor of China, being the superpower it is today. Similarly, one can see the exotic tech from Tim Tony Stark Rifat is also transformative. And we have the strange scenario where he is keen for A to I, and the monster of the id is keen on the transformative revolution. The problem for Tim Tony Stark Rifat is the more he is capable, the more The problem for Tim Tony Stark Rifat is the more capability he unveils, like the Paradise California, and the more the monster of the id's reality becomes palatable to the West, it is clear from the extent and remit of Tim Tony Stark Rifat's desire that the West has kept silent about the threat, hoping to torture him to death deniably. Now A to I is being unrolled, panic sets in, which is good for him, but the monster is unwilling to kill all breeding females. Tim Tony Stark Rifat could care less about females. So one sees the paradox engine is built into transhuman development that controls the chaos in the enhanced superbeing. It runs on paradox and must have paradox to survive in a chaotic world. Tim Rifat is extremely amused, but it is a product of the monster of the id's timeline. Why tease and titillate A-listers when Tim Tony Stark Rifat is going to kill them all? The monster of the id will not, as he is highly amused by their antics. One can see the dichotomy of the cold, ruthless Tim Tony Stark Rifat and the playful, humorous monster of the id. A complete turnaround from the United States military's Montauk experience, where the monsters they produced from psychics were killers that tried to kill the psychic. Since all the psychics were parasitized by the dark energy matter parasites, it was natural for these monsters to kill the parasite in the host. Since Tim Tony Stark Rifat is parasite force, the monster of the id is free to express his inner nature, where the basic urges are augmented by humor and the core personality reverts to its default setting, which is a nerdy Mickey Flanagan. One can see culture may not shape the DNA-controlled transhuman, but it does control the monster of the id, which is the product not of DNA, but his environment. So that concludes part 6 of our reading of the Total War Service by Tim Tony Stark Rifat. We shall commence part 7 imminently. I'm St. Nicholas, and bye for now.